The rain fell hard on the metal roofs of the spaceport market, turning the streets into rivers of dirty water. Bright lights flickered above, but the shadows between the stalls were deep and cold. The crowd pushed through the narrow lanes. People, shouting prices, bargaining, and hurrying with bags of food and machines. No one stopped to notice the small figure standing alone near the corner. She was a young alien girl, thin and trembling. Her skin carried faint glowing lines, marks of her people, but dirt covered most of them. A torn cloth hung from her shoulders, soaked through, clinging to her fragile frame. She hugged herself, trying to keep warm, but the cold cut deep into her bones. Her eyes, large and filled with fear, moved across the market, searching for kindness, finding none. Merchants saw her but turned away. Some laughed quietly, whispering words like "cursed" and "orphan." Others spat near her feet, telling her to leave. She had not eaten in days, and her small hands shook as she reached for a piece of bread left on a crate. Before she could touch it, a man shoved her back. "Not yours," he barked. She stumbled, fell into the puddle, and the bread disappeared into another's hands. The girl sat in the water, shivering, tears mixing with rain. Around her, the market moved like nothing had happened. No one cared. She looked ready to give up, her body too weak to fight anymore. But then, from the edge of the crowd, someone stopped. It was a human. He was no soldier, no merchant, no important man. He wore the uniform of a janitor, his boots muddy from long hours of work. His face looked tired, lined with years of labor. He had stayed late to clean the docking bay floors, and now he was on his way home. Yet his eyes paused when they saw her. He could have walked on like the rest. But something in her shaking form, something in her silent, desperate eyes, made him freeze. For a moment he just stood, holding his small food packet, rain dripping from his jacket. Then he walked closer. The girl flinched when his shadow fell over her. She pressed back against the wall, expecting another cruel hand, another harsh word, but the human crouched down slowly, lowering himself to her level. His voice was calm, gentle. "Are you hungry?" he asked. Her lips parted, but no sound came. She stared at him, uncertain if this was another trick. The man opened his packet, revealing a piece of bread and some warm stew in a container. He set it on the ground between them. "Take it," he said, nodding softly. For a long moment she did not move. The market noises blurred into a dull roar as the girl stared at the food, then at him. Finally, with trembling hands, she reached out and pulled the bread close. She bit into it carefully as if afraid it would vanish. A small sound escaped her throat, a mix of relief and pain. The man smiled faintly. "Eat slowly," he murmured. As she ate, the whispers began again around them. A merchant sneered, "The human feeds the cursed one." Another laughed, "He will regret touching her." But the janitor ignored them. His eyes stayed only on the girl. When the stew was gone, she looked at him, her mouth opening as if to speak, but she closed it again quickly, lowering her gaze. Her body still shook, but her eyes were no longer empty. For the first time that night, there was a spark of life inside them. The human stood and offered his hand. She hesitated. The rain drummed, harder, thunder rolled across the skies, and the crowd grew thinner as people rushed for shelter. He kept his hand out, waiting, not forcing. At last, her small hand touched his. It was cold, fragile, but she held on. Together they stepped away. From the market corner, neither of them knew what danger followed. Neither of them knew that this single act of kindness would echo far beyond this night, far beyond this city, across the stars themselves. The rain washed the dirty streets, but it could not wash away the truth. In a galaxy that had turned its back on her, one human had chosen to stop, and that choice was about to change everything. The rain had slowed by morning, but the market was still wet and heavy with the smell of damp metal and spoiled food. Stalls opened one by one, merchants shouting louder than the thunder had the night before. The alien girl walked beside the human janitor, her small hand gripping his sleeve as if letting go meant falling back into the shadows. She moved carefully, head low, afraid of every glance. Her torn cloth still clung to her thin body, dripping rainwater. People noticed, and their stares were sharp. Some whispered, others pointed. "Is that her?" One woman muttered. "Yes," another answered. "The cursed child. Don't go near." The janitor heard them, but he did not slow. His steps were steady, his shoulders broad as if his presence alone could shield her from the eyes around them. He led her toward a quiet corner where he sometimes rested after long shifts, behind a row of storage crates. The spot was small, but at least it was dry. He placed his work jacket on the crate and motioned for her to sit. She sat slowly, her eyes never lifting from the ground. The food from last night had given her a little strength, but her face still carried exhaustion. "Rest," he told her. His voice was calm, like a stone in the river, unmoved by the rush around them. For the first time she spoke. Her voice was thin, broken by hesitation. "Why, help me?" He crouched near her, brushing mud from his boots. "Because no one else would," he said simply. Her glowing lines flickered faintly as if her body reacted to his words. She wanted to believe, but fear still wrapped her heart. Then the whispers grew louder. A group of young men passed by, laughing cruelly. "Look, at him feeding trash," one said. "Humans are fools." "That girl brings nothing but bad luck," another sneered. "She should have been left to die when her people fell," a third spat. The janitor's jaw tightened. He looked at the men, his eyes hard, but he did not reply. Instead, he pulled out another small piece of bread from his bag and gave it to the girl. His silence spoke louder than their cruelty. The girl chewed slowly, still glancing at the men until they disappeared into the crowd. She whispered again, almost to herself. "They hate me. They fear you." The janitor corrected, his voice steady. "Fear makes people cruel." Her eyes lifted to his face for the first time. In them he saw not just hunger, but deep loneliness. The market roared around them, engines humming, coins clattering, people trading. But in that little corner, it felt like the world had slowed. Then she pulled something from under her cloth. At first he thought it was only a broken trinket, but when she placed it in her palm, it glowed faintly like a captured star, a small crystal pendant. She stared at it, then at him, her voice trembling. I cannot lose this." The janitor leaned closer, curious. "What is it?" Her lips pressed shut, as if the words themselves carried danger. Finally, she whispered, "It is all I have left. My family, my people. Everything is gone, but this..." She closed her fist around the crystal. "This keeps them alive in me." He nodded. He did not ask further, though questions burned in his mind. Why would a starving child risk carrying such a thing? Why did others call her cursed? Why did her eyes seem older than her years? The sound of boots interrupted his thoughts. Not the careless steps of shoppers, but the heavy rhythm of men who hunted. Two figures lingered at the edge of the market, their faces hidden under dark hoods. They weren't buying. They weren't selling. They were watching. The janitor felt it instantly, the sharp focus of predators. His hand instinctively moved to shield the girl, pulling her closer. She noticed too, her eyes widening, her body shaking again. "Who are they?" he asked quietly. Her silence was answer enough. The men began to move slowly, as if waiting for the right moment. The janitor rose to his feet, his back straight, his tired eyes suddenly fierce. He had faced long nights, heavy machines, and endless work, but never hunters. Still, something inside him refused to step aside. The girl clutched the crystal to her chest, whispering a single word he barely heard, a name. Her true name. It hung in the air like a secret too heavy for a child. The janitor looked down at her, then at the watchers. The market no longer felt safe. Kindness had drawn him into her storm. Now whispers were turning into footsteps, and footsteps into pursuit. He did not know what lay ahead, but one truth was clear. Walking away was no longer possible. The market grew busier as the day stretched, but for the janitor and the alien girl, time felt heavy, like a rope tightening around them. The two men in hoods had not moved closer, yet their eyes followed every step. The janitor pretended not to notice, but inside his mind was racing. He leaned toward the girl, speaking softly. "Who are they?" Her small hands clutched the glowing pendant against her chest. She shook her head, whispering, "If they see this, they will take it." The janitor studied her. The crystal was no ordinary jewel. It pulsed with a soft light that seemed alive. He had worked long hours in the docks cleaning scraps of technology left behind by traders from across the stars, but he had never seen anything like this. "Why?" he asked. The girl finally raised her eyes, her voice barely above a breath. "Because it holds the map." The janitor frowned. "A map?" She nodded. "To my people. The last of them." Her words sent a shiver down his spine. He had heard stories of her kind, once rulers of a small but proud colony, destroyed in a war no one dared to talk about anymore. The victors called it justice. The survivors called it betrayal. Most believed none of them were left alive. But here sat a child, thin and fragile, holding proof otherwise. She leaned closer, her voice trembling. "They burned our cities, they hunted us down. My mother, my father, they tried to send us away. We ran into the dark with nothing but this. It holds the stars where my people hide. If they get it, they will finish what they started." The janitor's chest tightened. He looked at her small frame, at her frightened eyes, and felt anger rise in him. Not at her, but at the world that would let this happen. "You've been alone since then?" he asked. Tears formed at the edges of her eyes. She nodded once, quickly, as if speaking it aloud would make the pain too heavy. "Alone," she whispered. The janitor wanted to say something comforting, but words felt too small. Instead, he placed his rough hand gently on her shoulder. She flinched at first, then slowly relaxed. But their fragile moment shattered when one of the hooded men stepped forward. His voice carried across the market, low but sharp. "You there. Human. Step aside." The janitor stood quickly, moving between them and the girl. His boots splashed in the puddles as he squared his shoulders. "She's under my care," he said firmly. The second man laughed, a sound without warmth. "Your care? She belongs to no one. She carries something that does not belong to her." The girl pressed the pendant tighter against her chest, her breathing fast. The janitor could feel her shaking behind him. He tried to think fast. He was no fighter. He had no weapons, no power. But he knew the market's twists and shadows better than most. Long nights cleaning had taught him where the doors stuck, where the lights flickered, where the ground was uneven. Maybe that knowledge could save them. "Stay close," he whispered to her. Then he grabbed her hand and ran. The market exploded into noise, shouts, curses, footsteps pounding behind them. The janitor shoved past startled merchants, pulling the girl through narrow lanes between stalls. The hooded men followed, their heavy boots crashing closer. They turned down a side alley, past rusted pipes and steaming vents. The janitor yanked a lever as they passed, releasing a burst of hot vapor that filled the corridor. Behind them came a cry of frustration as their pursuers coughed in the mist. Still, he knew it would not stop them for long. The girl stumbled, nearly falling, but he held her steady. "Just a little more," he urged. They burst into a dark storage yard at the edge of the docks. Abandoned crates lay stacked high, forgotten by traders who never came back. It smelled of oil and rust, but it was quiet. For the first time since the chase began, they had a moment to breathe. The girl leaned against a crate, panting, her face pale. The crystal glowed faintly, lighting her small hands. "They will never stop," she whispered. "They want the end of us." The janitor knelt in front of her, his face lined with determination. "Then we don't let them win. You're not alone anymore." Her eyes widened, glistening with tears. For the first time, she seemed to believe him. But even as he spoke, the sound of boots echoed again in the distance. The hunters had found the trail. The janitor rose to his feet, jaw set. His simple life as a cleaner, unnoticed and forgotten, was over. By helping her, he had stepped into something far larger than himself. And though he did not yet know it, this secret, the crystal, the girl, her people, would ripple far beyond this market, beyond this city, and one day, across the galaxy. The sound of boots grew louder, echoing through the metal walls of the docks. The janitor's heart pounded, but his grip on the girl's hand never loosened. She clutched the glowing pendant tightly, its faint light pulsing like a heartbeat. "Run," he whispered, and they moved again. The alleys twisted like a maze, narrow and wet from the night's storm. Water dripped from broken pipes, and sparks flickered from loose wires. The girl's small feet splashed through puddles as she struggled to keep up, but the janitor slowed his pace just enough to guide her safely. Behind them, the hunters' voices carried like knives in the dark. "Don't let them escape. She has it. Stop them." The janitor pulled the girl into a side corridor. He knew these paths. He had spent years walking them with mop and bucket, unseen by merchants and captains. What others ignored, he had memorized. Every shortcut, every broken vent, every blind corner. Now that knowledge became his weapon. They reached a rusted door. The janitor shoved it hard and the hinges screamed. The door swung open, revealing a narrow service tunnel lit by a single flickering bulb. "In here," he said. The girl hesitated, fear in her eyes, but he pulled her gently. The tunnel smelled of oil and dust, the floor slippery with grime. They moved quickly, their shadows stretching across the walls. Then came the slam of boots again. The hunters had found the way. The janitor spotted a control panel on the wall. He grabbed a loose pipe and struck it, sparks flying. The tunnel lights shut off completely, plunging everything into darkness. The girl gasped softly, clutching his arm. "Stay close," he whispered. The hunters cursed behind them, their footsteps slowing as they fumbled in the dark. The janitor guided her forward, step by step, until they reached the end of the tunnel. A grate blocked the exit. He pushed, straining against rusted metal. For a moment it did not move, and panic rose in his chest. Then with one final shove, the grate broke free. Cold air rushed in as they stumbled into the open. They found themselves in an alley lined with stacked cargo crates. Neon lights from the market flickered in the distance. But safety was still. Far the girl tugged at his sleeve, her voice trembling. "They won't stop. They'll follow us forever." The janitor looked down at her, his face hard but calm. "Then we'll stay one step ahead." The hunters burst out of the tunnel behind them, their hoods thrown back, revealing scarred faces and eyes filled with cruelty. One raised a weapon, a long metal rod that hummed with energy. "Give us the crystal," he shouted. "Hand her over, and you may live." The janitor stepped in front of the girl, arms spread wide. "You'll have to go through me." The hunters laughed. "A janitor? You think you can stop us?" But the janitor did not back down. His whole life he had been overlooked, treated as nothing. Yet in this moment, with a frightened child behind him, he felt stronger than ever before. "Run when I say," he whispered to the girl. Before the hunters could react, he grabbed a loose crate and shoved it hard. It toppled, crashing onto the ground between them. Dust and smoke filled the air. "Now!" he shouted. The girl ran, clutching the pendant, her glowing lines flickering brighter as fear and hope battled within her. The janitor followed close, his eyes scanning for their next escape. They ducked into another alley, this one leading deeper into the docks. The air smelled of fuel, engines humming in the distance. Ships loomed like giants, their hulls dripping with rain. They reached a locked gate. The girl's breath came in sharp gasps. "We're trapped." The janitor dropped to his knees, pulling a small toolkit from his belt. Years of cleaning had forced him to learn small repairs, broken locks, jammed machines, faulty circuits. His hands worked fast, twisting wires, forcing gears. The hunter's footsteps thundered closer. Almost there. he muttered. With a final spark, the gate clicked open. He shoved it wide, and they slipped through just as the hunters rounded the corner. The gate slammed shut behind them. The janitor jammed a piece of pipe into the lock, holding it closed. The hunters slammed against the bars, snarling in rage. But the janitor and the girl were already running again, deeper into the maze of the docks. They finally stopped inside an abandoned storage hangar, the door half broken, the space filled with shadows. The girl collapsed onto a crate, clutching the pendant to her chest, her small body shaking. The janitor knelt in front of her, his voice steady though his heart still raced. "You're safe for now." Tears ran down her cheeks, glistening in the faint glow of the pendant. "Why do you help me? You don't even know me." He looked at her, his tired eyes softening. "Because no one else will, and because sometimes one act of kindness is enough to change everything." Outside, the hunters' voices still echoed, promising they would return. But inside that dark hangar, for a brief moment, hope flickered brighter than fear. The hangar was silent except for the soft dripping of water from broken pipes. The air smelled of rust and old fuel, but compared to the chaos of the chase, it felt like a safe cave. The janitor pulled a broken metal sheet across the entrance, blocking the view from outside. It would not hold forever, but it gave them time. The alien girl sat on a crate, hugging her knees. Her small body trembled, not just from cold but from the weight of fear. The crystal pendant glowed faintly in her hands, casting soft light over her face. The janitor crouched nearby, catching his breath. His muscles ached, his chest burned from running, but his eyes never left her. He had seen many broken things in his years of work, machines, walls, lives, but nothing looked more fragile than the child before him. "You should sleep," he said gently. She shook her head quickly, her glowing lines dim. "They will find us again." "Not tonight," he replied, his voice steady. "You're safe. Here, I'll watch." For a long moment she stared at him, then she asked softly, "Why? Why do you keep helping me?" The janitor looked down at his rough hands stained with oil and dirt. "Because I know what it feels like," he said slowly. "To be ignored, to be treated like you don't matter." He met her eyes. "But you do matter. Don't let anyone tell you different." Her lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, she loosened her grip on the crystal and held it out for him to see. The glow pulsed brighter now, as if it responded to trust. "This is not just a jewel," she whispered. "It is a key." The janitor leaned closer. "A key to what?" She took a shaky breath. "To my people. To what is left of us." The crystal shimmered and small points of light appeared in the air above it, stars shifting and moving like a map. The janitor's eyes widened as he saw clusters of systems he had never recognized. "They scattered us," she said, her voice breaking. "When the war came, when our cities burned, some escaped. My mother, my father, they gave me this. It holds the paths to hidden places, to the survivors. If I can bring it to them, maybe we can be whole again." Tears slid down her cheeks as she spoke. "But if they take it, it will be the end. They will hunt the last of us until nothing remains." The janitor's chest tightened. He reached out slowly, not to take the crystal but to rest his hand on hers. His voice was low, calm. "Then we will keep it safe. You're not alone anymore." Her eyes filled with something new. Hope, fragile but real. They sat in silence, for a while, the map of stars glowing between them. Outside, the noise of the market faded as the night deepened. The hangar's broken roof had holes, and through them, pieces of the real night sky shone down. The girl looked up at the stars, her eyes reflecting the light. "My people used to believe every star carried a song, that even when far apart, we were connected by the music of the sky." The janitor followed her gaze. For him, stars had always meant distant ships, faraway places he would never visit. But hearing her words, he saw them differently, like a bridge between souls. "Do you still believe it?" he asked. She hesitated, then whispered, I want to, but I have been alone too long. It is hard to believe when you are hungry when no one sees you. The janitor's voice was firm. Then believe now, because I see you. Her breath caught in her throat. Slowly, her glowing lines brightened, soft light tracing across her arms and face like patterns of living fire. It was not just beauty. It was her spirit shining again. For the first time since he met her, she smiled. A small, uncertain smile, but real. The janitor leaned back against a crate, watching her. He knew the danger was far from over. The hunters would not stop. The pendant would draw more enemies. But in that moment, under the broken roof with the stars above and the faint song of hope returning to the girl's eyes, he felt the meaning of his choice. One act of kindness had turned into something much larger. The girl leaned closer, her voice soft. "What is your name?" He chuckled quietly, realizing he had never told her. "Eli," he said. "Just Eli." She repeated it, almost like a prayer. Eli. The stars shimmered above, and for the first time in a long while the galaxy did not feel so empty to her. But as the night deepened, shadows still moved outside the hangar. The hunters had not given up. Their search would continue. And when morning came, Eli and the girl would have to run again, yet neither of them felt as alone as before. The first light of dawn crept into the hangar through the broken roof, painting the floor with pale gold. The rain had stopped, but the air was heavy with silence. Eli sat against a crate, his eyes half closed, though sleep never truly came. He had kept watch through the night, listening for footsteps, waiting for danger. The alien girl slept lightly beside him, the crystal still clutched in her hands. Even in sleep, her body trembled, as if the weight of fear refused to let go. Eli looked at her and felt a strange mix of sorrow and strength. He had protected machines, tools, and ships his whole life, but never something as fragile and as important as this child. When the sun rose higher, the market outside stirred awake. Voices drifted into the hangar, traders opening stalls, carts rolling on the streets, the city alive once more. Eli knew they could not stay here. The hunters would search again, and the hangar would not remain hidden. He gently shook the girl's shoulder. "Wake up," he whispered. "It's time to move." She blinked, her eyes adjusting to the light, then sat up quickly, clutching the pendant tighter. "They're coming?" "Not yet," Eli said. "But they will. We need to stay ahead." He guided her out of the hangar, through narrow lanes that led deeper into the city. The morning air smelled of fried food and engine smoke. The girl walked close to his side, her head low, trying to disappear in the crowd. They stopped near a supply stall, where an old merchant, a woman with gray hair and sharp eyes, sold tools and food. Eli had known her for years. She was one of the few people who sometimes gave him scraps when he worked late. "Eli," she said, squinting at him. "You're out early. And who's this?" Her eyes moved to the girl. "A friend," Eli answered carefully. "We need food, and maybe a place to rest, just for a while." The old woman studied them both. Her lips pressed tight, but after a moment, she sighed. "Inside then, quickly." They followed her into the back of the stall. It was dark, lined with crates and spare parts. The girl sat quietly, clutching the crystal under her cloth. The merchant handed Eli a small loaf of bread and a flask of water. "You shouldn't be walking around with her," the woman muttered. "People are whispering. Hunters are searching." "I know," Eli said, "but she needs help. I can't just leave her." The woman's eyes softened for a moment, but then her voice lowered. "You don't understand, Eli. She carries danger. If they find you with her, they won't just take her. They'll take you too. And worse." Eli's jaw tightened. "Then, let them try." The girl glanced between them, her eyes wide. She could sense the tension in the air, the way trust wavered like a candle flame. Hours passed in the small stall. The girl dozed off again, her head resting on her knees. Eli sat, nearby, planning their next move. He thought of smuggler routes, of old tunnels in the docks, of anywhere the hunters might not search. But then he noticed the old merchant slipping out quietly. She whispered to someone at the doorway, her voice low but urgent. Eli's chest tightened. He stood, moving closer, his heart thudding. Through the crack in the door, he saw them. 2 men in dark coats, their scarred faces hidden in shadow. The hunters. The merchant's voice was sharp. Quick. They're inside. The human and the girl. I've done my part. Now pay me. Eli's stomach turned to stone. He spun back, rushing, to the girl. She opened her eyes, startled by his urgency. What's wrong? No time, he said, pulling her to her feet. We've been betrayed. The door crashed open behind them, and the hunters stormed in. The merchant's face, twisted with greed and fear. I warned you, Eli, she hissed. You can't save her. The girl cried out as one hunter reached for her. Eli shoved a crate into his path, sending tools clattering across the floor. He grabbed the girl's hand and pulled her toward the back exit. The hunters cursed, their boots striking the ground like thunder. One swung his rod, the energy humming as it smashed into the wall, sparks flying. The girl clung to Eli, her small voice breaking. They'll take me. Not while I'm breathing, Eli growled. They burst out into the alley behind the stall, the morning sun blinding for an instant. Shouts followed, the hunters close behind. The merchant's voice rang out, desperate for her reward. Don't let them escape. Eli pulled the girl down the alley, his heart racing. The betrayal cut deep, not because of surprise, but because it reminded him how cruel people could be when faced with fear and greed. Yet as the hunters closed in, he tightened, his grip on the girl's hand. Betrayal would not be the end, not for him, not for her. The alley shook with the force of footsteps. Eli ran, pulling the girl behind him, his lungs burning with every breath. The hunters were faster, their shouts bouncing off the metal walls. The morning sun lit the market, but for Eli and the girl, the light brought no peace, only danger. The girl clutched the glowing pendant, its light spilling through her fingers. They won't stop, she cried, her voice breaking. They will take it and they will finish my people. Eli's chest tightened. He knew she was right, but he also knew giving up was not an option. He pulled her into a service tunnel, a narrow passage filled with old pipes and wires. His boots splashed in shallow puddles, his grip firm on her small hand. Behind them, the hunters' voices grew louder. You cannot run forever, human, one shouted. Hand her over, and you may still live, the other sneered. Eli's jaw clenched. His voice rang back firm and clear. Not a chance. The tunnel opened into the docking yard. Ships loomed above them, massive and silent, waiting for their next journey. Workers bustled in the distance, unaware of the chase happening in the shadows. Eli spotted an old cargo shuttle at the far end. Its engines were weak, its paint peeling, but it could fly. He had cleaned that ship many times before, repaired small systems when no one else cared. He knew it could carry them, if they could reach it. Hold on, he told the girl, his voice steady. They sprinted across the yard, weaving between crates. The hunters emerged from the tunnel, their rods glowing with deadly energy. One struck, the beam slicing through a crate beside Eli. The explosion knocked him off his feet. He fell hard, pain shooting through his side. The girl screamed, clutching the pendant as the hunters closed in. Eli forced himself up, his vision spinning. He could not stop now. Not when everything depended on this moment. He grabbed a loose wrench from the ground, just a tool, nothing more. But in his hands, it became a weapon. He swung it with all his strength, striking one hunter's rod aside. Sparks flew and the man stumbled. Run! Eli shouted to the girl. She hesitated, tears streaking her face. Not without you. Now. His voice cracked, but it was filled with fierce command. The girl turned and ran toward the shuttle. The pendant glowed brighter, guiding her steps like a star in the darkness. Eli faced the hunters, his body weak, but his spirit unbroken. He blocked. Their path, each strike of their rods met with desperate swings of his wrench. He knew he could not win, but every second he fought gave her a chance. The girl reached the shuttle. With trembling hands, she pressed the pendant to the control panel. The ship's systems hummed, lights flickering to life. The pendant was not just a map. It was a key, unlocking ships meant for her people. Engines roared, echoing through the yard. The hunters turned in shock, realizing too late what was happening. Eli, bruised and bleeding, gave one final shove, knocking them back. He stumbled toward the shuttle, his strength nearly gone. The girl reached out from the open hatch, crying, "Eli!" He pulled himself inside just as the shuttle lifted from the ground. The hunters leapt, but the ship rose higher, flames bursting from its thrusters. In seconds, they were left behind, their shouts swallowed by the roar of engines. Inside, Eli collapsed against the wall, gasping for breath. The girl dropped beside him, tears streaming, her small hands gripping his tightly. "You saved me," she whispered. He gave a faint smile, his voice weak but steady. "No. You saved yourself. I just helped." The shuttle soared higher, breaking through the clouds. The stars opened above them, endless and shining. The pendant glowed brighter, projecting its map across the cockpit. Routes to hidden colonies, places where her people still lived, waiting for hope. The girl looked at Eli, her eyes wide with wonder. "We can find them," she whispered. "We can bring them together again." Eli nodded slowly. "Yes. And when they ask how, tell them it started with one act of kindness." Her lips trembled and she pressed her forehead against his arm. "I will. I promise." The stars stretched before them, vast and endless. For the first time in her life, the girl felt the future was not only survival, it was hope. And across the galaxy, as whispers of their escape spread, a story began to grow. A story of a human janitor who stood against fear and cruelty. A story of an alien girl whose light refused to die. One act of kindness, small and simple, now echoed across the stars.